everyone. Thank you for attending this session. So yesterday night, I was reflecting, and I was thinking, why do I have so much fun in this summit? Why do I like it so much? And I was thinking that people are so excited about the use of AI. They're so optimistic when it comes to AI. And when it comes to education, I think AI is one of the most exciting things that ever happened to education because it almost forces educational reform. But today, we also have to talk about the challenges and the ethical considerations when it comes to AI in education. And we're so glad that we have 4 top figures from AI and education, and we're going to talk about responsible AI. What are the challenges that exist in this sector? So we are so glad and honored that we have with us Mr. Stavros Yiannouka. He's the CEO of World Innovation Summit for Education under the Qatar Foundation. Thank you for being with us.
Great to be here. Thank you.
We also have with us Mrs. Sasha Rubel. She's the head of AI and public policy at AWS EMEA. Thank you for being with us. We have with us Mrs. Clara Hawking. She's the head of AI at GlobeEducate. Thank you. And Dr. Diomidis Spinellis. He is the professor at the Athens University of Economics and Business and Delft University for Technology. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I want to give 1 minute to all of you to introduce yourselves. Just a couple of sentences.
Okay, well, as Elena said, I'm CEO of WISE. It's those of you who are here at the immediately preceding session, you would have heard my wonderful colleagues describe what we do. So we're a think and do tank that looks at innovation in education globally. We do research. We run capacity building programs that support innovation in education. And of course, we advocate around the world in support of good education practices that improve learning and life outcomes for people around the world.
My name is Sasha Rubel, and as mentioned, I lead our public policy work for artificial intelligence in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. What that means concretely at Amazon Web Services is we look at how we can support startups and governments to harness the opportunities of this technology to transform their countries and their communities. And a huge part of that is looking at how we can promote through the cloud and also through access to artificial intelligence services, deeper access to research, deeper access to local content, and deeper access to services that can provide personalized learning for countries like Greece, where having access to generative AI tools and, for example, the Greek language is absolutely essential in order to transform their education sector.
And I'm Clara Hawking, and I work as head of AI for GlobeEducate, and we are a group of more than 60 schools in 4 different continents, 12 different countries, where we provide K through 12 international education for children. We have about 12,000 staff members in total, of which 5,000 are teachers. So we're facing an interesting time getting everybody ready for the future. And my job is to do that safely and meaningfully so that we integrate AI into our education system in a way that the children are benefiting from it and that the teachers feel safe and confident in utilizing the tools.
Diomidis Spinellis, Professor of Software Engineering at the Department of Management Science and Technology at the UEB and of Software Analytics at the Department of Software Technology at the TU Delft. I work a lot with students from undergraduates to graduates to research students. AI is the most exciting development I've seen in my career for many decades. And it is both exciting and something that kept me awake at night over the summer when I realized that it could answer more than 80% of the exercise I give to our programming students, getting 10 out of 10.
Amazing, thank you. So, as you noticed, we have so many different backgrounds of these people, and it's so interesting to me that they're looking at education through very different lenses. So I wanted to start with a very general question, and I want each one of you to give an example of how you think GenAI can help with education, but for this example, also mention the key considerations or challenges that we have to take into account to responsibly shape education. Do you want to kick us off?
Happy to. So I have to declare myself first as something of a technology skeptic when it comes to education. And I'm a skeptic because if you look at the story of maybe the past 20, 25 years, maybe even longer, going back to radio, television, the personal computer, all these technologies at one point or another were meant to transform and democratize education. And the reality has been one of, I would say, over-promising potentially and under-delivering. Now, I'm very close to making a 180-degree turn because of generative AI. I believe that this could potentially represent an inflection point in terms of what we can deliver for teachers and learners through technology. And the reason I say this is because with GenAI, I think we have the potential here for a tool that begins to approximate human-to-human interactions not just in a quantitative, dispassionate way, but actually in a qualitative way. And here I might disagree with my colleague's earlier statement that GenAI is incapable of empathy. You and I were at the same event in Stanford a few weeks ago, and there was one presentation that caught my attention, and this has to do with a program called Replica. Now, because I think we're a kind of a PG-rated conference, let me just describe Replica as, broadly speaking, a program that allows you to design an online friend, let's say. And there was some research done here, asking people how they're interacting with this tool, right? And what their friends are able or not able to do for them. And this was, information that was volunteered. These were not sort of guided questions. These were open questions. And what the researchers discovered, much to their surprise, was that Replica, the friend, the AI friend, had talked a not insignificant number of people, mainly young men, out of suicidal thoughts. So it had prevented them from, taking perhaps the ultimate, making the ultimate, sacrifice, so to speak, and ending their own life. So, we're at a point, whether you find this encouraging, scary, or a little bit of both, I think we're at a point where this technology can begin to approximate human-to-human interactions. Now, what are the challenges? Very, very quickly, in my view, I think throughout this conference we've heard, a number of speakers, put out a call. When we're designing these tools, please, let's sit down with teachers, let's sit down with learners, and make sure that we are designing them fit for purpose. And we have also, safety, the safety, security of learners, both in terms of the accuracy of what is being fed back to them, but also what happens to their data and how it gets used.
Amazing point. Yeah, there are a couple of speakers in this summit that mentioned that we should talk to the people who have the domain expertise, and in our case, teachers have the domain expertise. So we need to talk to them and work with them if we want to create these tools. Thank you. So, Mrs. Rubel.
So Stavros, I want to help you make that 180-degree turn by first starting off and sharing a very personal anecdote without revealing my age. Is that I grew up in West Africa and I was homeschooled. And at the time, access to the internet was not something that was possible on a regular basis where I was living in the capital city of Mali. I was homeschooled out of a school in New York where, with great difficulty, I had to, via DHL, have access to the courses in order to continue my homeschooling. I remember the exact age I was when I first learned about the internet and opened up an email account. I was 17 years old. What I see now in terms of generative AI is the opportunity, particularly for countries that can leapfrog in terms of digital transformation, to access personalized learning that makes sure that they are part of this digital transformation. And for me, this is one of the most exciting aspects, is the dimension of personalized learning that makes sure that nobody is left behind. Another aspect that I see as really important, just as an anecdote, is that there's recent research that shows that, for example, in the United States, 1 in 12 children have a speech impediment. And there's not enough time in classrooms that oftentimes in public schools are completely overrun, where there's maybe one teacher for 60 students. There's a great opportunity to use generative AI to make sure that these students are getting personalized education that help them to address the challenges that they have and encourage diversity and inclusion in the educational space. One of the startups that AWS has been working with is a startup called Roiby. And Roiby was developed as a kind of robot interface with young children in order to encourage them to address these kinds of speech challenges and beyond the school day, provide them with personalized learning that helps them address and overcome those challenges. Another aspect that I think is crucial in terms of also Greece is the opportunity to make sure that generative AI is giving countries and researchers access through the cloud to an amazing amount of data in order for them to accelerate at higher education levels access to that kind of information, but also access to resources. One of the things that we've done at AWS recently is to work with the University of Oxford to digitize their libraries so that through generative AI, you can have access to resources and tour this library and what they have without ever actually setting foot in the United Kingdom. So that scales access in terms of knowledge that otherwise would be completely out of reach to a lot of citizens around the world. Lastly, I think it's really important that we talk about the question of local content. This is a real priority for AWS, is to make sure that there is local educational content through generative AI available in local languages. And it's one of the reasons why we're very happy to be supporting the development of a Greek large language model that can be integrated into education and promote that kind of access. I would just close in terms of challenges, and Stavros, you articulated it beautifully, that one of the preoccupations, which should exist, is the question of data protection and data privacy, as well as questions around bias and fairness. And this is really why at AWS, for us, responsible AI isn't an afterthought, but is the starting point, the middle, and the end, because we're convinced that responsibility drives trust, that trust drives adoption, and that adoption drives innovation. So responsibility needs to be the starting point in the ways in which we think about integrating generative AI into education, but also across the board.
I love it. Personalized learning, digitalization of learning resources, local content, but also data privacy, and we need to be cautious. Thank you so much. Mrs. Hawking?
Yeah, fantastic points. I would have made some of the same from both of you, so thank you so much for bringing that up. I think one of the things that I find revolutionary about the new technologies is that we have an opportunity now to help support our educators. They have been under a lot of pressure for far too long. There's very limited time. Many educators put in private time in order to make the time ends meet, and they burn out very quickly. It's hard to get teachers. It's hard to retain teachers. But with this new technology, we have an opportunity to use it well, to free up some of the administrative tasks and some of the very time-consuming tasks from teachers' workload, which then allows for them to return to building relationship, which is why most teachers got into the field anyway. And so with the more time for relationship building, the children also learn many more of those AI competency skills that they themselves need to develop more: collaboration, teamwork, problem solving together, discourse through obstacles by working with their teacher. And teachers also have more time to work with each other on developing their lesson plans and their strategies, something that has been triaged out in the long list of to-dos in the everyday. So I think that's the one thing that I find very promising for education in the time to come. With that being said, we are facing significant challenges, certainly in K-12 education. One of the challenges is, as you know, innovation races ahead of regulation. And we have very little regulation, which means we have had very little focus from tech companies on how to design technology for the benefit of safeguarding children, not just their data, not just their privacy, but also the output or how they interact with the technology. We are seeing regulation coming slowly, which means that we need to start thinking about compliance and oversight, about auditing, about transparency. These are going to be key points for every organization, but also for K-12 organizations. We need to be able to say in a transparent way how we are using these advanced technologies in our ecosystem. And I think that is an enormous challenge, because we're sort of reverse engineering our efforts. We already have tech, and some tech that we are deploying doesn't or will not meet the standards going forward. And that, I think, is a challenge we really have to think very hard about and act on very quickly.
Amazing. We heard time savings for teachers, but also we need to have regulations and guardrails to protect teachers and students. Thank you. Dr. Spinellis.
Very interesting points, and I couldn't agree more with them. One thing that comes to my mind is that several studies have shown that tutoring improves a lot education outcomes, and their AI can help significantly. I'm working with co-supervising a PhD student, an economics student, who is doing some very advanced data mangling on a supercomputer. And using AI, I understand, she has reached a level of issuing commands and writing programs that it took me 3 years to reach. She did it in a couple of months. So this is something amazing. It also acts as a leveler. Personalized tutoring is expensive when either you go to a tutor or to a small group, whereas with the AI it can be it's much more accessible. It's not entirely free, but it is a lot more accessible. I've seen it personally, trying to learn a new programming language rather than reading the book, which would take me days. And let's face it, it's not something very interesting. I could use ChatGPT to ask specific questions about each problem that I faced, and this made it a lot more interesting, accessible, easy to reach and write and become productive very quickly. This is something many students can do, and thereby benefit in having a more engaging environment. I've seen it in our group projects that we did this year. Students were encouraged to use the generative AI in their assignment, and they did projects that were maybe sometimes an order of magnitude more complex, more effective than the projects they did last year without AI, because they had this benefit of a co-pilot, somebody who could be with them and teach them how to use advanced concepts and other skills. Having said that, something that worries me a lot is that many students might see this as a shortcut and thereby not learn the basic skills that are required in their domain, because they can just go to a generative AI prompt, issue it, and then get the answer and directly think that this is over. This is worrying because in another experiment that we did, we had students be given a rather difficult assignment and full access to generative AI. Most of them failed. We had got consent from them and from our ethics board to study their interactions. And what we saw from their interactions was that they had difficulty in issuing the right questions, the right prompts, and understanding the answers. They were getting an answer, it wasn't exactly right, because AI isn't always correct, and they couldn't understand what the problem is, and they were getting into an infinite loop of issuing questions and trying to guide the AI without knowing how to guide it. This, of course, is a problem. You should perhaps trust me to use AI in order to solve a computing problem for you. You should definitely not trust me to perform OpenAI surgery on you, even though I can give the prompts and get some answers, because I'm not a domain expert. And this is something we should keep in mind, how it's a big challenge, how we can teach our students, our pupils, the basics so they can productively use AI.
Amazing. Focus on the basics. Although we have these new tools, we will still need to focus on the foundational skills. But also, you mentioned the use of GenAI for projects, which I love, because the more generative AI will be in education, we will have more projects and assessments, traditional tests. I loved your points. So they didn't know each other's answers, and nobody overlapped. Everybody shared a different example, a different concern. I loved it. So let's move to the concerns now. And there is a growing discussion that GenAI can exacerbate the discrepancies, the inequalities that exist in education. And I wanted to ask you whether you have any strategies or any collaborations between policymakers, tech industries, educators that we can leverage to address these risks, such as discrepancies in education, and mitigate them.
Yeah, I mean, the question of inequalities, digital divides. I mean, I hate to sound fatalistic, but it's been around for a very, very long time, and I'm not sure that one technology or another is necessarily going to be an answer to addressing what is potentially a broader societal economic issue that may or may not be systemic to the way that we organize ourselves as societies, as civilized. I mean, we're getting into quasi-philosophical territory. Now, what I see happening though is, and here I think the technology companies can be applauded in some ways, is that because of the cycles of innovation are so rapid, the cost of delivering these solutions drops very quickly and very significantly. And what you have today actually is if you look at things objectively, is that the very wealthy, as compared to some of the poorest people, the gap between the kinds of technologies they have access to is actually much less than historically was the case. I mean, the difference between a high-end, the most expensive iPhone, I guess, is the most expensive mobile device on the market. The difference in the technology that it packs versus a more affordable Android. I mean, I don't want to insult anyone, but a device that's a lot more affordable and accessible. It's the difference in what they can do is practically irrelevant, right?
Yeah.
And so what to bring it now back to education, so I am less worried about, the fact that, that the wealthier schools, international schools like the ones that Clara serves are going to be so far ahead technologically from, say, low-income public sector schools. I don't think that's where the challenge is going to be. I think, actually, surprisingly, where the challenge is going to be is the schools that are, in wealthy countries that are private sector, they're going to continue to have great teachers with great technology, as compared to low-income schools that will, over time, gain access to great technology, but we still haven't solved how do we get great teachers into those schools, or how do we upskill the teachers in those schools so that they can make use of the tools and deliver the solutions. So I think actually the deficit or the divide is going to be in access to human talent, not technology. That's my prediction, at least.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You said everything. I have no comments.
I want to build on what you just said, Stavros, in terms of the question of skills, and Diomidis also reflecting on what you were talking about with regards to students that are interacting with generative AI but don't necessarily know how to use this technology, is we see that as really one of the key challenges, is the question around digital skills and preparing young people for the future of work, but also people who are in their mid-careers who may not actually have the skills necessary in order to work in a world of AI. My 18-year-old daughter, when I asked her what she wants to study at university, says that she wants to be a prompt engineer. When I was 18 years old, that career did not exist. So the reality is that there's going to be an enormous amount of jobs that will exist over the next 5 to 10 years that don't exist today. And the responsibility we see from the private sector is to work with civil society, with partners, with governments, to build these kinds of programs that prepare people for the work not only of tomorrow, but also of today. And I just want to share with you all a couple of statistics that came out from a report that we commissioned that was released in the beginning of February, specifically looking at the question of digital skills. So in this report, we found out that 61% of businesses said that not being able to find staff with the right digital skills was slowing down their adoption of AI. And over a quarter of them said they wouldn't adopt AI because they actually didn't have the skills necessary inside their company to integrate this technology. On the other side of that, over a third of employees say they don't have enough time to learn new skills, and nearly half, so 45% of employees, said that actually the cost of training programs was the prohibitive factor that stopped them from learning these skills. And so one of the things that we've been doing at Amazon Web Services is addressing these challenges on multiple levels. One is through our AI Ready commitment, making sure that we provide access to over 80 classes around what artificial intelligence and machine learning is, but not only from the technical perspective, because we don't need everybody in this room to know how to code. That is not the future of work. We do, however, need everybody to understand what this technology is and isn't, and this goes for students, workers, and policymakers, but also what it means to develop and design these solutions in a responsible way so that the leaders of tomorrow are equipped with the knowledge that just because it's technologically feasible doesn't necessarily mean we should build it. And that's a real commitment that we have, is making these massive open online courses available. A second level of that is really partnering at the local level with nonprofits, with governments, with other initiatives and other private sector counterparts to make sure that people who are in the workforce today are equipped with these skills, but also people who have really great ideas about how AI could completely change the future of education, but may not be from a business background or may not have expertise in startups. Particularly here, I'd like to flag marginalized communities and women who oftentimes have great ideas, but don't necessarily, A, get the funding from venture capital, or B, have the opportunity to build these kinds of alliances with various expertise to launch their programs. What we've done at AWS is to build programs that really identify promising opportunities for the use of generative AI in key areas like education, like healthcare, and accompany these individuals that have these ideas through the process of proof of concept, all the way towards launching their startups that address these factors for AI for good. So it's really about training young people, training people who are in the workforce, making sure that that training targets marginalized communities and groups, and then also making sure that they have not only the technical skills, but also the responsibility skills and business skills to translate these ideas into action at the local level.
Amazing.
That's exciting. I look forward to hearing more about that. I think that it resonates very deeply with me that the new technology that we're seeing is really a socio-technical shift, where before it was good to be a computer scientist or engineer, but now it's not just us that are needed. And I find actually that being both a computer scientist and a philosopher helps me a great deal, because I have a solid foundation in the humanities as well. And I think that it allows for a greater opportunity of people with different skill sets to come in to participate in the conversation about what AI will be and how we want to live with it. How does it shift the way we think about ourselves as human beings with this new technology? And it will affect everything from our family lives to our place of employment to our health. And how long we will live and how we will live throughout those years. But only for some of us. I think that the digital divide is real. I think it's a human rights issue, and I think it's very tangible. It's true that it is easier to get access to good technology. However, it requires that you have a plug for charging it. It requires that you have electricity. It requires that you have backup battery storage if the sun didn't shine that day, if your electricity comes from solar panels. And it requires that you understand just the very elementary things that you need, or if you drop it or it becomes wet under the monsoon rains, will it still function? So I think that the very logistics of the difficulty that we're facing, it's real. We've seen it over 20 years of digitalization, both locally and in communities that are severely impoverished. I work with an organization with a school in Kenya where we tried to leapfrog over digitalization and straight into AI and the metaverse. And it has had some good effect, but it's a real challenge. It's a challenge to help the teachers understand and help the parents understand what this spooky metaverse and what this generative AI is. You can imagine how foreign that sounds for someone that's completely unfamiliar. But it's a small drop in an ocean of need. And add to that if people are not on the internet, they're not producing data. We're not seeing what their behavior is. We're not understanding their ideals, their language, their culture, their image, because they're not represented in the data set. So we have a whole part of the world that is not moving forward with the technology. And I think that is something that both in schools we need to work very actively with. I think that our educators need to be very aware of the limitations of the technology as well as the opportunities. So that we can build that into our AI literacy curriculum and help our children also bridge that divide between those who have access and those who do not.
Let me add another career path that didn't exist 5 years ago and is now available thanks to AI. Chatbot manager, the person who manages chatbots, adding to Sasha's example. Regarding the challenges we face, I'm very much aligned with what Stavros said, that human capital is becoming increasingly important. Many tasks that could be handled by pupils and students at home, pupils could be tempted to outsource them to AI and thereby miss learning opportunities. This means that a lot more work needs to be done in class through interactive exercises in small groups, and also to cultivate skills that are at a higher level in Bloom's taxonomy and using the knowledge, understanding it, building on it to do other things. Elements where educational systems that are less advanced are not good at. Educational systems that use a lot of rote learning are based on rote learning, and similar exams cannot handle, and they will get even more set behind due to AI being used by students and pupils. So in this sense, although I said earlier that AI can act as a lever through personalized tutoring, being able to bring the educational systems forward, provide the human resources required is a big challenge which we need to address.
Amazing. We have 5-6 minutes left, so I wanted to open up the floor for questions from the audience because we have a very diverse group here, and I want to have specific questions. Can we start from? Yeah.
Can I just make a quick sort of just observation before we get to the question, which is, I really think we need to stop talking about a digital divide, because I think it's a little bit misleading, because what we're really talking about is an electricity divide. That's a 19th century technology, and we still haven't figured out how to make it accessible. And that's what drives the digital divide. But by calling it a digital divide, I think we're putting the focus on the wrong things. But that just A thought occurred to me as I was listening to Clara describe problems with access to electricity.
If you have any comments, please build on that.
Well, yeah, I think that's one way to put it. And I think it's one of the problems with tech companies having pushed digitalization for 20 years. So digitalization without what? Without teaching the teachers how to use the technology to optimize learning, how to use them as pedagogical tools. So these are the kind of oversights. So I suppose it's a semantics issue, but certainly the very fundamental logistical parts that need to be in place in order for us to succeed in moving the whole world into a world where they can benefit from advancements in technology. There's significantly there, and it could be an electricity problem. Yes.
Yeah. Clara, can I build on that? And again, just sharing to make it real, a personal anecdote. I lived for a very long time in Ethiopia, where access to Wi-Fi is a real challenge. And I would leave my office in Ethiopia, and outside the office, at the end of the day, there would always be hundreds of students leaning up against the wall of the building of the African Union. And when I first saw it, I didn't understand why. And then somebody explained, oh, well, they all have the password to the Wi-Fi of the African Union, so they lean up against the wall in order to access the Wi-Fi so that they can download courses online that they can watch later on. And so I think 100%, I agree with you, it is an infrastructure problem as well. And it's also an opportunity because via these kinds of tools online and also via the cloud, you can accelerate access to these kinds of resources, noting that 100% infrastructure and energy is a challenge, but that also with advances in technology, things like cloud or edge computing provide enormous opportunities to access these kinds of information and then make sure that they can access it afterwards offline.
Can I just jump in? I want to jump in.
I love the interaction.
Because you made me think of a country, Sweden, which is a country where the children's rights have been domesticated into Swedish law. And under Swedish law, children have a right to Wi-Fi. I think that's a significant push towards let's make sure that all children in our country have opportunity to learn in an equitable way. And I think that while we can do a lot, and corporations and organizations can do a lot to support, ultimately we need our regulators, our legislators, to make the commitment both in terms of regulation, but also in terms of investing in our shared future.
We have the question here. Yeah.
First of all, congratulations to all of you. It was a very interesting and insightful panel. I'm Stella Tazzi. I'm the Onassis Scholarships Manager at the Onassis Foundation. Actually, I have a zillion questions to all of you, but I just wanted to stop at what Professor Spinellis said and ask a bit more about that project with ChatGPT, which I found very interesting and very scary, to tell you the truth. Just to ask if it was a collaborative project or individual project where they failed. Was it a collaboration between the students, or were they tested individually and they failed?
It was an individual receipt exam, so they were advanced students supposedly knowledgeable of this introductory course, and this was the reason we were allowed to run it as an experiment.
Okay.
For the group project, they are allowed to have access, and they do very well in that.
Okay. And the second of all, in terms of, let's say, I don't want to say underprivileged countries, but countries that face issues with their education, and I mean with their secondary education and teachers, because technology is advancing in huge leaps, and sometimes the students are more literate in terms of technology compared to their teachers. Basically, my question is more to Amazon, but the rest of you are welcome to try. Do you have any schemes, let's say, to those countries to address the limitations that the educational community has in order to address this kind of chasm between teachers and students?
That's an excellent question. My daughter knows more about technology than me, and I work in AI, where she's able to do things on the computer that I don't understand. And I think that indeed there is a gap in terms of knowledge with regards to teachers who are largely around my age versus younger people, where they are in advance. And one of the areas of focus that we also have is an initiative dedicated to teacher training. So you can have the best tools in the world, But if the teachers aren't educated in terms of how to integrate those in a responsible way into the classroom, they're not going to get adopted. And so a huge focus is really also about accompanying teachers and upskilling them in terms of how they can use these tools. And in parallel, speaking to your point, Clara, also engaging with policymakers to say, here are frameworks and guidelines of how technology can be integrated in primary education, secondary education, and higher education in a responsible way, and programs that we would suggest. There are public-private sector partnerships that are prioritized that invest in teacher training of how to use these skills.
Is it affordable, though?
So a lot of the work that we're doing at AWS, it's massive open online courses, and they're free training classes. One of the commitments that we have is about this kind of public-private sector partnership and making sure that that expertise is available to countries and to teachers and to researchers and young children. The majority of those classes are free.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for this very interesting panel with multiple perspectives on the same issue. Let me come back to one of the issues that Stavros has brought into the discussion, this gap widening between different schools. And let me challenge your idea that there's an issue of talent of teachers in different areas. Now, something I find interesting here, we have not a representative of public education. I know you have Clara with Globe Educate, but I mean, for most of Europe at least, public education is the main concern of the societies for bringing them up forward. Now, I think there's not just lack of talent, because you can find very talented and very motivated teachers and educators throughout any education system, even in public education. It's more an institutional and policies issue. And the fact that education is a very slow-moving train, really, around the world, is because it's hard to change. Now, I'm less optimistic than you guys, because I think even in this very fast forward-moving work in terms of technology, this slow train will find it very difficult unless it changes the institution and the organization, the policies related to public education really catch up and adapt. And I would like your view on this and whether I'm wrong in being not so optimistic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, thank you for that, the observation and the question. And look, it's very hard to generalize, and I recognize that. You know, a lot depends on the context. We at WISE work, you know, a lot with organizations in the what's called the global South, or used to be called the Third World, and the less developed. So you understand, and there, you know, the situation is quite dire. I mean, there are very credible studies that show that somewhere between 60 to 80% of children who graduate schools in many of these systems are effectively illiterate. They are functionally illiterate, and you have oftentimes, you know, situations where you know, the teachers are either very poorly trained, they're often absent. So, you know, kids are going to school, there are no teachers. All sorts of issues. So, you know, my comment, I think, was largely informed by that context where really there is a human capital challenge. But look, you're absolutely right, and one of the things that we've been, you know, the drum that we have been beating at WISE very often is that, yes, we need system change. But system change, again, our experience suggests that you can get the policies right, but if you don't have school leaders and even classroom leaders able to internalize and bring those changes about, the reform will fail. So one way or another, I think it does go back to, you know, to having that human human capital in the classroom, in the school, that's going to make use of the innovation, of the policy change, whether that involves technology or not.
Thank you very much. I think you're the ideal panel to answer my concern that I've had for a while. I'm seeing AI being incorporated in everything we do. Okay, I can see it preparing me for exams, for whatever, everywhere. I also see billions being invested in all of this business. And I'm pretty sure the billions are not dropping from the sky. I see AI applications being offered for free, and I see better ones being offered for a subscription. And having been through, very recently, through the energy crisis, so for example, in Greece, everybody was installing gas heaters, and then we were out of gas, or gas was so expensive, we either had to pay more or be cold. I've seen elderly people have private medical insurance, or dogs having medical insurance, and then the next year, the medical insurance is so expensive that we cannot afford it. So now I'm looking at AI offering cleverness, potential to people, making us, it's basically our source of being smart, okay? Some of us now have been in universities, we've studied, okay, but younger people, I see them being dependent on AI so much. So what if at some point, those who invested the billions, or because there is a whatever crisis, extraterrestrials invade Earth, and then all of a sudden, AI is very expensive, so what can we do? We have to offer subscription so that it survives. It's a business. So what happens then? Those who can afford it become the smarter, and those who cannot afford it are dumb, because that's the way we end up thinking by using AI. What do you think?
Incredible question.
That's a good question.
Business incentives of AI developers versus educational values, and go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's a fundamental question, and I think again it's a regulatory issue that needs to be addressed, because I think that that is the way that the cookie crumbles when it comes to business, right? Everybody is in business in order to make money for their shareholders, and not for donating everything away. And so we are risking that we will see a rise of the people who can afford. Some have speculated, they call it a rise of an AI class, so the AI class of humans, and then where a few get wealthier and many don't have the opportunities to rise because they don't have access to the technology. In a very real way, we face that in our organization. We're deeply committed to training all of our staff and give them the core AI literacy skills that they need in order to succeed, in order to make decisions about when to use the tech and when not to use the tech. Also very important. We're all equally committed to our children, and we also want to support our parents because they also need to learn a lot about that world. But it's an investment, and because we are an organization, for-profit organization, we decided this is an investment that is worth for us to make. It's not easy, but something as simple as making sure that all of our staff has access to one tool so that we can train all of our staff in that one tool is complex. It is massively expensive and difficult for us to do. There's a lot of discussion about what should be free in education, but I think sort of tongue-in-cheek, free is not always free. There's a price to pay. We saw that during the pandemic, where tech companies were very sweet to offer their services for free to support schools during the closing, while at the same time they were gathering data and putting trackers on children's devices and on parents' and teachers' devices without telling anyone. So I think that it's a complex issue, and I think that we should expect tech companies to want to make money, and they're going to offer the services to the people who can pay for it, which is why I think that we need our governments to go in and find a way to make this possible, certainly for children and for educators, because they are raising the next generation of citizens, and they should be AI literate.
Clara, can I add to that reflection? Because I think a key point, and great question, I think a key point in terms of questions about access is also linked to open source models. So what is the future of access to open source large language models that are widely available? And it's one of the reasons why at AWS we've partnered with a customer named Hugging Face, which is one of the leaders of access to open source models. However, that does not solve all of the challenges that you just evoked. Another part of that is the question of access to compute, because to run these open source models, you need the compute in order to both train and run inference on these kinds of solutions. And so I think there are a lot of debates right now from the regulatory perspective of how to ensure democratize access to innovation through access to these kinds of tools that are open source, and also democratized access to compute necessary in order to harness the opportunities there.
Let me add another optimistic view. Perhaps one could think that there is a fixed pie, and if AI takes a part of that, then we will not be able to afford it. But what is happening, what we hope will happen, is that productivity will rise throughout the economy, and this will make AI affordable to a large number of us. We could not afford the computing that we are using now 20 years ago, and nor the electricity we are using now, our ancestors in 1925. But productivity throughout the economy, the output has risen to levels that we enjoy this amount of computing, electricity, and all the other affordances we have. There are, of course, philosophical questions if we are better off or not, but I don't think that access to AI will be the problem.
And now we come to an end of this amazing panel. You're all rock stars. Thank you so much.